Hey guys, so in my last video about politics, I simulate what would happen if the Patriot Party formed, and how that would influence the next two elections. So the thing is that while it did technically form, and it did turn out to be a major third party that altered the results by a lot, then the party itself didn't really have any real representation in the government. So that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. A multi-party system, where there are 4 different political parties, each of which have something set up in a way where they are able to get national representation. So, I'm using this map right here. If you want to check it out, this is the URL. So, basically, I'm taking these numbers, which is basically how much Trump or Biden won the state in 2020, and then shifting them according to demographic shifts. Which, if you don't know, basically means that the Midwest is getting redder, but pretty much everywhere else, save for a couple states, namely Florida and North Carolina, are getting bluer. So, there are 4 different political parties. So, the Extremist Party, which is basically the Republican Party of today. The Conservative Party, which is basically a little less strict Republican Party. The Liberal Party, which is basically the Democratic Party of today. And the Progressive Party, which is basically the most leftist party out there. So, and as you can see, extremist is red, conservative is yellow, liberal is blue, and progressive is green, as you didn't realize that already. And just so you know, if Trump won the state by 10 or more points, not exactly by 10 or more points, but in between 8 and 12 points in 2020, according to demographic shift, then then they will be extremist. If they won the state but didn't get quite that big of a margin, then they are conservative. If Biden won the state but by less than 8 and 12 points in 2020, then they will be liberal states. So, and finally, if Biden won the state by 8 to 12 points in 2020 or more, then they're progressive. So, we are starting out at the 2022 Senate election. So, and as you can see, it's still pretty skewed toward today's party. So, the thing is that only 1/3 of the Senate seats are up for re-election in any given cycle. So, that's not nearly enough time for one of the new parties to gain national representation. Or at least, a majority of the votes. They still get national representation, but not much. So as you can see, the progressives are the new party that gained more national representation. And that's because they are winning states, that went very blue in the 2020 election, and have been blue for decades, like California and New York and stuff like that. While the conservatives, there aren't that many swing Republican states. But as you can see, Wisconsin is yellow, and that's because while Wisconsin flipped in 2020, the demographic shift in the Midwest basically means that Wisconsin would flip yellow in 2022, and the same will happen something similar will happen to a couple other states later on. But I'll explain that when we get to that point. But apart from that, not a whole lot has changed. And by the way, in case you're wondering, the reason why there's 2 Senate seats in Georgia is because this was made before the Georgia runoff election, which, as we all know, were swept by the Democratic candidate. So, even then, however, there would still be 1 Senate seat up for re-election in Georgia, because one of the runoff elections was a special election that was designed for someone to carry out the remainder of another person's term. So there's still going to be a Senate seat in 2022. But just so you know, I still have that seat as liberal. So the final makeup is 43 seats for the extremists, 41 for the liberals, 10 for the progressives, and 6 for the conservatives. So essentially, the Republicans would regain control of the Senate. But again, it's 2022 and it's the Senate, none of the new parties have any major national representation yet. Things get a little different when we look at the 2024 election, which as you can see, the progressives clearly have a plurality of the vote. So one of the big things that you might notice is that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are yellow, and Iowa and Ohio are now red. The thing is that how I'm calculating these demographic shifts is that they shift by 1 point every 2 years and 2 points every 4 years. So a state that won 10 points for Biden in 2020 would go either 8 points in 2024 or 12 points in 2024, depending on where they are. So yeah, and as you can also see, Minnesota and Michigan are still blue, but Michigan in particular, it would be blue by a very small margin, 0.8 points to be exact. But apart from those like changes in the Midwest, not a whole lot is different. But a couple other big differences I want to point out is South Carolina and Alaska are conservative. The thing is that in the 2022 Senate, I put South Carolina as extremist. But in 2024, it's conservative because the demographic shift put South Carolina below that 10-point threshold between 2022 and 2024. And Alaska was already on that 10-point threshold. So it would be conservative in both 2022 and 2024. So, looking at the final makeup, we have extremists having 135 points, electoral votes, liberals having 65, progressives having 208, and conservatives having 130. Now, in multi-party elections like this, there's something known as the center squeeze phenomenon, where there are two big parties that are on the edge of the whole thing, and then there are parties near the middle. In this case, the liberals and the conservatives. So they would actually since some people would be on the Liberal Party, for instance, would be more inclined to vote progressive, and vice versa. And same for the conservatives that voting extremist. Then chances are the two fringe parties would get more electoral votes than the center party. Which would make it difficult for the center parties to gain significant national representation. As we can see, this is kind of playing out in the 2024 election, with 65 electoral votes going to the Liberals, but 130 going to the Conservatives, which is actually pretty close to the extremist electoral vote total of 135. But that's mainly because the Conservatives are winning vote-heavy states like Texas and Florida, while the extremist vote is mainly spread out across a ton of low-population states. Because remember, land doesn't vote. So, what do we do here? Well, there are a few things that you can do. You could just say the progressives won right here, right now. You could also eliminate the two least popular parties by electoral votes. And have the parties with the most electoral votes proceed to a runoff. In this case, they would be fighting over Nevada, Arizona, Alaska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maine 2nd District, and also Maine as a whole, Nebraska 2nd District, Texas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, which I know is a mouthful, but that's a lot of states that they're fighting over. The states that have a higher liberal and conservative margin would probably go to their respective parties, but states that are much closer, like Michigan, would probably could go either way. But if you watch that one video that I made about majority voting, which I made over a month ago, if you remember, the process that I used is eliminate each party one by one until there is a party that has the majority of the votes. So in this case, we are removing the Liberal Party, and all of a sudden we have all of these states that are up for grabs. So now, again, states with the higher liberal margin would probably go progressive because of how close they are, like Nevada and Minnesota and New Hampshire, Nebraska's 2nd District, and Maine's 2nd District. Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan, though, are tough to call. Some states especially Michigan, they would be winning. The Liberals would only be winning by 0.8 points, which is a super narrow margin. And while Arizona and Georgia are a bit more clear cut, they're still close enough that they're still basically toss-ups when you factor in which liberals are going to the progressives, which liberals are going to the conservatives, because chances are none of the liberals will be voting for extremist candidates. Some some people in those states would, because it's not just because say Texas is conservative doesn't mean 100% of the population is conservative. So when you factor in that stuff, these states are super tough. If the progressives win all of these states, they would end up having a majority of the votes. However, if the conservatives won even one of these states, let's say Arizona, then they would have the upper hand. And, not quite the upper hand, but it would still prevent the progressives from reaching a majority of the vote. So in this case, since the progressives won at least one of the states, that pushes them over the extremist vote tally. So we will remove the extremist party. And if you look at it now, the two new parties are the only parties that are left. So chances are most of these states would vote for the conservative candidate. Because truth is, almost none of the extremist states, with the possible exception of Iowa and Ohio, would have any liberal sentiment, let alone progressive sentiment. So chances are, almost all of these states would go progressive. Though I do need to, yeah. So once we've done that, the conservatives would win with 277 electoral votes. So we would have a conservative winning the 2024 election if this were to happen. So that's not the worst thing in the world. After all, it's less conservative than the extremist party. No, so chances are they would probably have some more progressive policies put in place, because but it's tough to say. So and again, this is based purely off of one data point, and that is the 2020 election results. There are going to be, if a multi-party system does form, there are going to be a lot more factors that play into this kind of thing. So and these are factors that I can't really simulate in a video like this. Well, maybe I could, but I don't even know what some of those factors are. I just know that they exist. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video about multi-party systems and how one would play out if one happened in the US. So as always, I would appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to your channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Thanks, and have a great day.